Hey, welcome back to another Bitcoin Reformation podcast here with David Rufner and Jared Townley. Excited to be with you, coming to you in the middle of Lent 2025. So, David, how are things for you in this Lenten season?
Yeah, things are good. I'm sit here in front of you a bit refreshed. Kids have spring break. The two high school kids who are still with us spring break, so they're just finishing up. It's Friday as we record their spring break. But from this last weekend until yesterday, we snuck off to southern Utah to a little town there we love dearly. Got a little Airbnb, did just a lot of hiking, a lot of adventuring, some familiar places to us, and two or three or four brand new places. The new Slot Canyon, Peekaboo Slot Canyon. We did a Via Ferrata. Should check out Via Ferratas. It's not quite fully rock climbing, but it's certainly more than hiking or even bouldering. So we did that. That was just so much fun. And I'm really scared of heights, but you put a harness on me and lash me into something, and I do a little bit better. Um, yeah, we did that. Swam in Lake Powell. We found out that our dog can swim. That's fun. And then after all that goodness, on the way home, we were actually able to see Jared. We missed his wife. She was off for an appointment. But here they are, like 5 days landed in their new town, New Digs. And we got to meet Jared. My wife got to meet Jared for the first time. And then my wife, son, Josiah, daughter, Eden, and I got to meet his two littles, his 3-year-old daughter and 1-year-old son. And it was fun. It was a lot of fun. In fact, Jared, my daughter, Eden, at dinner last night said that Zoe spoiled Moana 2 for her because her coloring book, her Moana 2
Oh
coloring
no.
book, gave the ending, and so we were laughing at Eden as if she's really been, with bated breath waiting to see Moana 2. But it was fun to hear of our kids in the moment after we met you all, and even last night thinking about the Jared and Emily and family.
Cool. It was really nice, David. I mean, I think I text you this, that it's so cool to think about how, connections work and how different things bring people together. That there would be, I mean, maybe there would have been, but I have a hard time believing that we would have ever become connected apart from you, Ben, but then bigger picture, right? Bitcoin. And that's kind of what's brought our families together and us together too. And that's a really neat way that, not coincidence, right? Nothing is coincidence when your God is over all things and Lord of all things and in control of all things. So that God has brought us together through, and in this way is really cool to see you, meet you, and to sort of say, like you said, we're 18 years behind you, which is great. So, hey, if I am traveling with my kids like you are in 18 years, that will make this heart and soul
Yeah, yeah,
happy as well. So
yeah.
I'm grateful to see you and meet your family in that way too. Very cool. So yeah, like David said, we are our stuff is literally right now as we're recording this outside of our house. We have the loaders coming anywhere in the next couple hours, and we are beyond excited to finally get to sleep in our bed again, to finally have all of our stuff, all of our garbage, if you will, and for the kids to have their toys and just kind of get back into a routine of sorts, even though it's going to be totally new too. So in a brand new place, thousands of miles away from family, trying to create new relationships, make new friendships, figure out what on earth I'm supposed to do for my job and the role that I have here. So at my previous church, I was one of 3 pastors, and now I am the only one. And that's not to say that I'm the only person or the only one who is leading, but I'm the only pastor. So I'm surrounded by a lot of good people, though, a lot of good leaders alongside of me, too, which is part of the reason I'm here. I would not have came here if I didn't think I'd have people who would walk alongside me, lead with me, too. But very excited. Lots of drinking from the fire hose. I sent all of the school teachers at the school here a gif of a little kid with a garden hose, and he puts it right up in front of his face, and he turns it on, and it blasts his head back, and his hair goes. I said, "This is how I feel on day one." So there's just so much going on, and it's good to. I think I will appreciate our conversation today for the reason that it is a very normal thing in my life. And when life gets crazy and changes are happening, whatever feels normal is usually super refreshing and super good. So I appreciate both of you and the ability to be here with you and with our listeners too, as you listen into. So Ben, how are things where you are this day?
Things are fantastic. We like David, we're coming off of spring break and time of rest. Jared, I will be praying that times of rest will be coming for you as you in the next couple of months finally dig out of boxes and with some changes in family. We'll be praying for rest for you. But I've been thinking a lot about rest lately, and thinking about other people's work, and this kind of ties into Lent. So I was asked by PLI, Pastoral Leadership Institute, the organization that I work for, to write a message to pastors, just a word of encouragement. And the word that I shared was that, I don't know, somewhere midway through my parish ministry, I decided to take a vacation in the middle of Lent, and how restful it was, because as I admitted to these pastors in this message, I very much could relate to the apostles in the Garden of Gethsemane, whose eyes were going shut and who could hardly stay awake for the most important events in the history of mankind, right? I remember as a pastor getting to Holy Week, the most significant, pivotal moments of the Christian faith, and thinking, when is this week going to be over? And then I thought to myself, golly, that's a really bad way to do Holy Week. And if I'm feeling this way, it's probably coming out of my pores to God's people, and what an ineffective messenger of Christ I am. So I said, I told folks to consider taking a few days off in the middle of Lent so that they would be refreshed for Holy Week. And it kind of reflects around these words from Jesus in John 5. Jesus said to them, "My Father's working until now, and I am working." And then it says right after this was why the Jews were seeking all the more to kill him, because not only was he breaking the Sabbath, but he was even calling God his own Father. Notice that. So Jesus says, the Father has been working, I too am working. Jesus' statement is, I read it to say, yes, God took the seventh day of creation off as the Sabbath, and frankly, he hasn't taken a day off since. And so the Father's working, the Son is working, and there's something great about being able to say, it's okay when I'm not working. That Jesus was working even on the Sabbath. The Sabbath, Jesus said, is for man, not for God. And so taking this rest in the midst of Lent and Holy Week, where we're reflecting on Jesus' work, is all the more important. And it kind of ties sort of metaphorically to some things that I've been hearing about Satoshi Nakamoto. Not that he is Jesus, but he gave the Bitcoin community a tremendous gift in inventing the Bitcoin protocol. And I've just heard a number of people recently kind of celebrating Satoshi Nakamoto's work and the gift that he gave to us in a decentralized monetary protocol, and just rejoicing in the gift of Bitcoin. Not that it's anything comparable to the gift of Jesus, but I don't know, just a simple way to maybe tie in our Christian faith to the gifts of Satoshi Nakamoto and Bitcoin. So, all right, well, that's enough of me preaching. We want to do a little bit of an episode today on Bitcoin by the numbers. there are just all kinds of different numbers that come up. And I think this show will be a fun way to share in some ways, some miscellaneous information about Bitcoin, but in other ways, maybe some shocking stats. So as you're driving or out for a run or whatever you're doing as you listen to this, I hope that we'll bring a few interesting ideas about Bitcoin to you today. So, David, you want to lead us off?
Yeah, absolutely. Glad to. I was the one who suggested this sort of Bitcoin by the numbers. Certainly, I think every episode we've had thus far has had numbers involved with it. You're just not going to have a talk about money, about value and life without talking numbers. You can't even do it with the Christian faith. There's no such thing. It's just part of language. It's part of understanding the world we're a part of. And certainly both of those things are true with Bitcoin. So yeah, just kick it off. We'll just start super basic. And we kind of have a thread through some things we want to hit, but it won't surprise me if we rabbit trail a little bit. But the numbers are fun. And I just sat down actually with friends about 10 days ago. I did not bring up Bitcoin at dinner with them. They brought it up with me. And then I think they were a little bit maybe blown away by my enthusiasm, but as much as I thought they knew quite a bit about Bitcoin, he in particular, they were both wowed by some of these themselves. So it kind of made me realize just starting over might be a great way to do that. Okay, so the number that's most widely known when it comes to Bitcoin is 21 million. Why 21 million? I don't know. There have been some papers, some lines of thought, some theses proffered as to why 21 million. I will say that you'll see as we go through this. Some of the other numbers fit nicely with the number 21 million, but why 21 million Bitcoin ever? I just don't know. I was wondering the other day, have you ever read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy or listened to it, either of you? There's this question in it, what's the meaning of the universe? And the answer for what's the meaning of the universe isn't 21, but it is 42 towards the end of the book. It made me wonder if Satoshi was somehow playing off of that, half of 42 being 21. But there's 21 million Bitcoin ever that will be mined. Having said that, then, we can think of a US dollar. A dollar is divisible down into 100 parts, which is two points to the right of our decimal point, two spaces to the right. The Bitcoin is much more highly divisible, as it turns out. You can go 8 spaces to the right of that decimal point. And so if you think of that, that's quite a few numbers in there. Because you might say 21 million, how does that work when there's 8 billion people? Not every person could have one full Bitcoin. And you're just simply correct. You did some really good math there real quickly, right? But it turns out being able to divide each Bitcoin out so far, 8 to the right of the decimal point, which is 100 million parts, makes Bitcoin highly divisible. So 21 million, and then eight numbers to the right of the decimal point is how far it's divisible. And I will stop there. Oh, we lost Jared. There's Jared.
Yep. Sorry. I was trying to click the mute button there. So the next number I want to share is more of a niche number. So maybe we'll go back and forth here, but the number I want to share is 172. So 172, and this number comes from a website, bitcointreasuries.net, and it is 172 entities that are holding Bitcoin as some sort of form of treasury. And according to their website, 89 of those are public companies, and there are 12 governments also that hold Bitcoin as part of their treasury or reserve, right? So since we've last recorded, I think President Trump has officially issued that strategic Bitcoin reserve executive order as well in our last time. And I think we've talked extensively here about why this stuff is important, why these numbers matter. It's not just about who is getting the most or who has the most, but it's about the adoption of that one of the people I listen to most says Bitcoin trades like an option on its future adoption, in that's what causes the price to go up and down. And so these public companies, whether they're traded as a stock, whether it's a federal government that's holding them, they are much more in number than they were a year ago, and extremely much more in number than they were 5 years ago, and exceptionally more than they were when Bitcoin started. And so this is one of those things that it is so hard if you're new to Bitcoin, and I would even almost throw myself in that bucket too, that it's hard to even completely grasp just how crazy, unbelievable, how important even some people might say it is, or in some other words they might use would be inevitable. It is that these companies and governments now actually hold Bitcoin as a reserve asset, as something that's important for them to have to protect their own purchasing power and shareholder value. That is just so wild. And so if you're new, it's like, well, sure, MicroStrategy is doing it. The most recent one in the news has been GameStop. They're doing the same thing. Oh, the United States isn't going to sell any of the Bitcoin that they have. Maybe someday they'll figure out a way to not use taxpayer dollars to buy more. Like, it might seem normal to you, but I can tell you it is most certainly not. And so 172 different entities that hold it now, my guess would be that in years to come, that number will be magnitudes higher. That it will not be a 172 hold it, that maybe it'll be, let's have a list of companies that actually don't hold Bitcoin, that are missing out on the opportunity that it provides for companies, for organizations, for even, as we talked about recently, to churches and nonprofits as well. So that's a number I'm going to share. Ben, David, who's up next?
Yeah, I'll throw it out. I will share the number of users of Bitcoin. So the number of users that are currently being tracked right now, according to one article, is 500 million. So 500 million users of the Bitcoin protocol. And I was curious how many internet users are currently out there. 5.5 billion. So when was it that there were only 500 million internet users? And that was the year 2001. So for those of you who might think, I'm kind of late to the Bitcoin party. Maybe I'll invest in some other cryptocurrency that will make it big, because Bitcoin, maybe it's already had its day. It already hit 100,000. How much more can it actually go up? Imagine saying that about investing in Apple or Amazon in 2001. You would have done just fine if you had invested in Apple or Amazon or most any major internet company in 2001, when there were only 500 million internet users. So we continue to say in the Bitcoin world that we are early, that there is still a long way to go for Bitcoin to be adopted, and we do think that it will be adopted. I think there's a possibility that it could be adopted by 5.5 billion people, probably 10, 15, 20 years out from now. But we're still very early. So 500 million people using the Bitcoin protocol. So we'll throw it to David.
All right. Okay, I'll go with some numbers outside of Bitcoin, but that are part of the reason as to why guys like us are interested in Bitcoin. So I want to talk about a million. I want to talk about a billion. I want to talk about a trillion. And then the oddball is $500,000 and the pyramids. So, all right, you ready for me to tie all this together? A million seconds ago, A million seconds ago was 11.2 some days ago. I can envision that. In fact, quite frankly, when I say that, every time I look it up, I'm kind of surprised. Wow, there's a million seconds every 11 to 12 days. That's pretty awesome. I've never taken the time to count to a million, but it could conceivably be done. Get a team together, a million counting team, something ridiculous like that. A billion seconds. Do you guys know how long ago a billion seconds was? I might ask Jared to out himself here. Jared, how old are you?
I am 32.
Oh, hey, all three of us can imagine then how long ago a billion seconds was. It was 31 point something years ago. Um, so basically, a Jared lifespan is a billion seconds, which is pretty amazing. Now, my own children can't imagine that as much. They're doing things like, okay, my 16-year-old says, all right, twice as old as I am, but I still think it's hard even to do that kind of imaginatively. Imagine forward twice as long as you've lived presently. I don't know that I can do that because the different decades, for instance, kind of have their own pace, their own speed. I just don't know if I can do that. But nevertheless, a billion seconds is a Jared lifespan. How about a trillion seconds? Do you know how long ago this was?
It's got to be like hundreds of years, right?
Yeah, more. 3,100 plus years ago. 3,100 years. I mentioned all that because we throw around in American life millions. That's become pretty easy. I mean, that was sort of the Austin Powers joke. He comes out of some sort of cryogenic freeze. He's going to be the evil man. He's going to, hold somebody for ransom. I forget the exact storyline. No one actually really needs to remember, but for $1 million, and he's told to up it to 1 billion because 1 million isn't much anymore. Yeah, it's true. Billions. Okay. Billions. We throw around billions. We can think of state budgets, how much extra the state has from tax revenues, or maybe they are in the rears so much, like here in California, that we can think billions. And now in American life, in the last, I'm going to call it decade plus, we started throwing around trillions like they're millions. Trillions are the new millions. Like 40s are the new 30s, or something ridiculous like this. But it turns out trillions, I mean, they're big jumps between each of these numbers. A million seconds ago, 11 days ago, a billion seconds, 31 years, a trillion seconds, 3,100 years. I mentioned that because we have a U.S. national deficit now at 36 trillion and growing by a trillion less than every 100 days now. That's our liabilities. Our unfunded liabilities, meaning the promises that we've written with our mouths. I always think of this as now the end of another goofy movie, Dumb and Dumber. Do you remember when he opens the suitcases and it's just filled with a bunch of IOUs? The U.S. government has also handed out tremendous number of IOUs. We've overspent 36 trillion. We have another $210 trillion in unfunded liabilities that we've promised. And we've just kind of gone through millions, billions, trillions in an effort to say we really should respect the trillion word more than we presently do. Okay, $500,000 in the pyramids. How else could we size out $1 trillion? Well, here's how else we could size it out. If the pyramids were built, so it's thought, between 2700 BC and 1500 BC. So let's just call it 2000 BC. The pyramids are built. That's 4,000 years ago. All right. If starting 4,000 years ago, somebody had started handing somebody $500,000 every single day, you'd still only be up to 730 billion. You wouldn't even be up to your first trillion. Can you imagine being handed $500,000 every day? So all of that is to say, with this set of numbers, it's an attempt to, I suppose, imaginatively try to comprehend a little bit the scope of these numbers, but also kind of show the limits of our imagination so that some sobriety can come in when it comes to these numbers. I know the three of us and many, many more, many outside of Bitcoin, but many who have been so concerned about these numbers that further research, further reading, further curiosity has led them, in fact, to Bitcoin as a possible solution to this. This is part of the problem. These numbers are part of the problem that's happening with us in American and world life right now, is that we're printing so much money, we're overspending what we make. We know that's a bad recipe for any kind of home life, right? Why would it be a better recipe for national life and international life? And on top of all that, we're starting to deal with numbers that are really beyond the scope of the human imagination, which becomes its own sort of Achilles heel. I'm done with my set.
So I'm going to do another big number like that.
Okay.
The number is 84 trillion. And we have not talked about this at all on the show yet, so this is fun. According to Cerulli Associates, I'm reading an article on Merrill Lynch right now, the greatest wealth transfer in history, happening somewhat currently right now as the boomers and silent generation pass on and leave behind their wealth. It's estimated that they will leave behind $84 trillion in the next 20 years. And so David just talked all about how hard it is to even comprehend how massive that is, but it's huge. And so if you are someone who is like myself, right, I'm a millennial, just barely, almost Gen Z in by a few years. If you might be one of those people who will be receiving some of those things, the question is just like almost like the movie, right? If $1 million sounded like a lot of money to you when you were a child, maybe the next bar is $1 billion. That's what it takes to actually be wealthy, so to say, quote unquote. And so as you inherit these things, as hopefully they give to charities, right? Like 1517, like PLI, that happens as well. But as you inherit these, it's your opportunity to steward them. And we've talked all about that here. We think maybe there's a spot for Bitcoin in your, not investment advice, of course, your own portfolio, to do your own research and how that might be a part of you being able to steward what you've been given. But I also say this, that as this is passed on to people who maybe aren't as confident in traditional markets, who don't have as much trust in sort of the government, I guess you might even be as bold as to say in that way, that maybe more of those dollars will flow into things like Bitcoin, that is an alternative investment. That's outside of the current structures and systems. And so I'll come back to the same thing I talked about last time. Well, what is that going to increase? Going to increase adoption, right? And that more people are going to be using Bitcoin as the savings vehicle that it is, the store of wealth. That, you know what they say, the hardest thing is not to get rich, but it's to store and to keep your wealth once you have it. And so as a lot of people inherit money from their grandparents, from their parents passing, maybe Bitcoin is a way for them to help store, save, and then maybe even increase some of that $84 trillion that they will receive over the next 20 plus years.
All right, I got one for you. How many Bitcoin were sent in the last 24 hours? The reason why I'm interested in this is because we've been more and more in this kind of what just feels like a crab walk, flat-lined Bitcoin price, and maybe you're tempted to think, oh, there's really not much going on in the Bitcoin protocol. Maybe it's only like one or two Bitcoin are changing hands. No. In the last 24 hours, 215,196 Bitcoin have been transacted. That's 1% of the overall market cap of Bitcoin, which is so 215,196 Bitcoin trading hands. That's $18 billion. That's a lot of money that's being transacted, handed back and forth, and yet the price is as stable as it is. The whole network, or the whole cap of the entire Bitcoin network is right around 1.6, 1.7 trillion dollars. And so for $18 billion to be trading hands, I think that's pretty phenomenal. That's no tiny drop in the bucket. It's an enormous amount of money. This is Bitcoin is being used by the big boys, big girls, the big corporations, states, countries. I it's just it's astounding to think how much activity there is in the Bitcoin protocol, and yet how stable the price is. I think that's actually a really good thing for Bitcoin. Of course, I would love to see Bitcoin's value continue to go up, and I'm convinced that it will. But for Bitcoin, which has been proclaimed several times to be dead or dying or a tulip, just a bubble, right? For Bitcoin to just kind of keep chugging along at 80 some $1,000 a Bitcoin with all these Bitcoin trading hands, I think that's pretty phenomenal. David, you're up.
All right, I'm up. I had one number. You got me thinking about another number. I'm going to come back around to it. Well, actually, I'll stick with the number. I got to pull up my phone because I crunched it there as well. My number is 450, and it's 50%. I guess I have two numbers, 50%. So why 450? Every day right now, with a Bitcoin block being mined on average every 10 minutes, and the current reward or subsidy for a Bitcoin block being successfully mined to the miner being 3.125 every day, that equates to 450 new Bitcoin being mined. Now, that's a number that's smaller than it was even 2 years ago. Uh, 2 years ago, it was twice as much. It was 900, and that's because it was in the previous era. The eras are every 4 years, and the era before that, it was 1,800 Bitcoin every day. And then, think about it. 3 years from now, that would be cut in half, so it'll be 225 every day. And that has to do with, again, we've talked about it in the past, supply issuance, the supply issuance rate of Bitcoin. And so here's actually now a vocabulary word that has to do with the 50%. Bitcoin is considered to have an asymptotic, asymptotic, if I got that correctly, asymptotic supply issuance. And that means, in this case, every 4 years or every 210,000 blocks mined, 50% of the remaining supply is mined. Let's leave that 50% of behind and think of, like, you remember being in gym class as a kid and everybody was down at one end of the gym with your backs against the mats underneath the basketball hoop. Imagine the teacher told you to go halfway to the other end. You go halfway to the other end. And then the teacher says, okay, now as a class, go another halfway to the far wall. And so you do it. You go another halfway. And then you say it again. Let's go halfway one more time. Now you're about the free throw line, I would imagine. But the idea with asymptotic numbers, and in this case, 50%, 50%, 50%, going halfway there, and then halfway of the remainder, and then halfway again of the remainder, is that you keep getting closer to the end point without ever really touching it. Now, in the case of Bitcoin, Satoshi did allow for a full completion, a full final mining, but ultimately that's what's happening with the Bitcoin supply. In the first 4 years of the first era, 50% of all the Bitcoin were mined. In the next 4 years, 50% of the remaining was mined. And that's how it keeps going every 4 years. That even in the era that we're in right now, which began last April and will be approximately 4 years, exactly 210,000 blocks, a block being mined every 10 minutes. Our supply issuance now is half of what it was last time, but the effect of the supply and this 4 years is that after this 4 years is complete, we'll be kind of halfway to that goal line as compared to where we started at the beginning of this era. So we go halfway, and then we go halfway of the remainder, then we go halfway of the remainder. This is important because what Satoshi accomplished by this is he got a great number, like a huge percentage of Bitcoin out into the world while it didn't have much value. Why is that important? Because that got it far and wide. If you were to look up Bitcoin in the headlines right now, I would guess within the first 10 headlines, you would bump into some of those companies that you even mentioned, Jared. Certainly MicroStrategy, certainly GameStop. GameStop alone has something like $4 billion on cash on hand. They could buy up a lot of Bitcoin right now, more than the Rufner family. Let's just say that. Slightly more. But if you think about it, in the early years, it wasn't the GameStops or the MicroStrategies who were interested in Bitcoin. It was lots of individuals spread throughout the world, people who had some sort of early interest in this. Maybe they were really into cybersecurity. Maybe it was just one roommate to another. Hey, you got to get some of these. There's all kinds of stories why, but it got a lot of that Bitcoin supply out far and wide. Not nearly the adoption in terms of mass numbers that Ben started to give us and point us to. But nevertheless, far and wide, a lot of individuals beyond, certainly not nation states and not the big corporations. It appears now that the big corporations and nation states are coming and they will come. And they will be big drivers of the price higher and higher for all the investors, because you can't affect just a part of the Bitcoin network. If value goes up in one part of it, it goes up across the board. But Satoshi did that. In fact, where that leaves us now, and then I'll be done with my number, I've cheated with a couple numbers, is that more than 19 million of the 21 million have now been mined. That's pretty wild. That's in the first 16 years. And I think it'll take like another 120 some years for all of the Bitcoin to be mined. The last, what would that be? That last 1.5 million or just shy of 2 million. That's pretty wild. That's how these asymptotic numbers work. That's how the supply issuance works, is that now very little new Bitcoin is coming onto the market as compared to the Bitcoin already on the market. In fact, and that's the final thing I'll say, the percentage of new Bitcoin coming onto the market today in this era, and this will become only more severe in coming eras, it's less new Bitcoin compared to the overall supply than what happens with gold every year, physical gold. There's a higher rate of supply issuance of new gold just due to mining in the world than there is Bitcoin right now, which means Bitcoin now, it's got a lot of other boxes it's got to check off. But in terms of scarcity and new Bitcoin coming onto the market, Bitcoin is less inflationary, they say, than gold. All right. All that was wrapped up in a few numbers and kind of went on for a while, and I'll hand it off.
So the year is 2140 that all of the Bitcoin is estimated to be mined at, assuming 10-minute blocks kind of regularly on the schedule. But that's not my number. My number is 9,485. So this is so great. I mean, we are literally leading each other down the path. So David's talking about mining. My number is 9,485. See if I can pull this over here and here. I don't know how this is going to work with my little thing here. Can you see this? Yeah. So this is called a BitAxe. Shout out to the Fold Mining Club. And what this is a small Bitcoin miner. So I'm going to put it back over here on my desk. And the number 9,485 is the amount of BitAxes that are currently mining to what's called public pool. And so there probably is actually more of those, because they could be mining to their own sort of node, an Umbrel or a Start9 or something like that. But there are 9,485 of those little devices that are mining on the Bitcoin network. And so why does that matter, right? Who cares? Well, in the last month or so, there have been 3, right, guys? I think 3 solo block finds from truly small miners. So you can buy one of these. I just sent Ben a text with 2 different places to go buy one of these bit axes for himself, even a better one that will get more. Oh, and David has a nerd axe, right? Is that what that's called?
This is called Nerd Miner, much less powerful than your bit axe, but also
Right.
a solo. Yeah.
Good. So David, I think David's was somewhere around $50 or so. You can buy a BitAxe Gamma, so that'll do about 1.2 terahash. So that's an amount of calculations, amount of times. Remember we talked about rolling the die, so it's that many die rolls per second. You can buy one of those for like $180, $250, depending on what kind of fan system you want to put on it. And why is that significant? Well, if you wanted to buy an actual miner that's, top of the line, brand new, you're going to pay probably $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 for one of these things. And not only that, you can't just plug these things into the wall. This is not your household outlet. You can't just plug it into your 120 volt sort of thing. You have to get special power hookups to even be able to use these high-end machines. So not only is it expensive, there's a super high barrier of entry to actually buy and run one of these heavy-duty miners. Sure, you have a lot more calculations, a lot more dice roll that it does. But these small little things use 15 watts of power. 15 watts. And so that's the equivalent of like a LED light bulb, a 60-watt incandescent, but running as an LED would be about 15 watts of power. So it's very minuscule. We're talking dollars over the course of an entire year if you run it 24/7. And what it's doing is it is truly taking part. It's mining. It is submitting guesses to try and find that right nonce number to then mine a block of Bitcoin. And so if you buy one of these, you have a chance, right? Some people call them lottery miners, of mining a block yourself. And so what would happen if you were to mine that block? Well, today you would get 3.125, I think is the block reward of new Bitcoin plus whatever the transaction fees were. And so at today's price, around $85,000 or $84,000, that's a pretty good chunk of change for you and for your future to just suddenly come into 3 whole Bitcoins. Now, of course, this is, some people would say, oh, you're gambling. You could probably accuse me of that. I would say to you that it's a great tool for learning that doesn't cost you thousands of dollars to install and put into your home. That I have learned more about Bitcoin and the Bitcoin network and Bitcoin mining because I've had this thing. And do I really truly hope that I get a block, I find a block? Sure, that would be cool. But I have I am not setting my heart on it. I have no intention of actually getting one. I'm sure I won't, sort of thing. But it's taught me a lot about what Bitcoin mining is. I think it's a really easy way for people to get into the space and sort of just experiment with, hey, what does it mean? There's a fun little dashboard you can look at on your computer that tells you how hot your chip is, how fast your fan's running, and it even shows you like what guesses, the difficulty level of the guess that your miner submitted, and you can watch it do the calculations too. So it's a very easy hands-on way to sort of get involved in Bitcoin mining. But as a pastor, Bitcoin is not what my job is to do, right? It's not my primary responsibility. But if I have it out on my desk and somebody asks about it, it's a great conversation starter. And so, I can say, hey, that's actually that's a Bitcoin miner. Do you know anything about Bitcoin? And, then we can talk about why it's important and why I'm into it. And then they leave my office thinking I'm a weirdo and a nuthead. But, it's a great conversation starter, even as it sits on my desk. So 9,485 BitAxe is the name. So that's mine.
And Jared, this is so perfect. You teed up my next number, and this is really fun, guys, doing this just kind of round robin. My number is the total amount of hash that I was going to share. So, Jared, what did you say your BitAxe? How many hash does it do?
So, you're talking like exahash. My BitAxe does about 600 to 700 gigahash, which is actually less than terahash. So that's sort of the next step up from gigahash to terahash. And then exahash is, I think, 2 more steps up from that. I truthfully don't remember.
So the number is 113 trillion. That's the number of Bitcoin's current difficulty in mining a block. 113 terahash, right? Does that sound right, Jared?
No. So are you talking difficulty, or are you talking amount of Bitcoin power that is estimated that's actually on the network mining?
Difficulty, and that's a little bit different.
Yep. You're good. I hope my Bitcoin miner gets a difficulty of 113.78 trillion, because then I'll find a block. So that would be great.
Right. Yeah. So the idea is, as I understand this, and Jared, you're way more proficient at some of this, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I was trying to explain this to my son the other day. He had gotten a lottery ticket as a gift from someone. He's not 18, so I won't say whom. He scratched it off. Of course, he won, and so I redeemed it for him. Whether it's illegal to have given him the dollar or not, it's all being shared within the family. But that he was very intrigued and getting very excited about, wow, how cool is it to get a dollar scratch off and to win $3? And I said, that Bitcoin actually is a bit of a lottery. There are just lots of people essentially trying to roll the dice, and they're trying to come up with a very specific number, and as more people are trying to roll these dice to get numbers, Bitcoin naturally adjusts itself so that it takes more and more dice rolls in order for these Bitcoin to be mined. And that actually can tell you a lot about who's using the network, how many people are using the network. And so the number of hashes that it takes on the difficulty chart right now is 113 trillion, which has been, for the most part, a pretty nice over the last several years. It's just continued to climb. But you know that the Bitcoin network is alive and well, that as its difficulty continues to adjust, more and more people are using it, are trying to roll these dice. And so, 113 trillion hashes is the current Bitcoin difficulty. Jared,
No, you're good. Can I just add one thing?
Yeah.
So Ben's totally right. Like, usually you explain it like it takes 113 trillion guesses now to try and find a block. That's kind of the way we'd explain it. And then the interesting thing to me that I think we usually miss when we talk about it is that the difficulty goes up means the numbers that are acceptable for a block S actually get smaller. And so it's kind of this inverse thing, right? So we would think bigger number means it's just harder, but you think about it as there's less numbers that are acceptable. So most Bitcoin miners, when they find a block, actually find a block that's more difficult than it is. It's not as though people are finding blocks perfectly right on the difficulty level. They're usually finding blocks that are beyond that, and that's how they mine it. So higher difficulty, smaller number of acceptable guesses that will earn you the ability to mine the next block.
And this is why I need to get a BitX to continue my learning adventure. Jared is far and away ahead of me in technical understanding, and I appreciate learning from you. So thank you. David, up to you.
All right. Well, am I right, Jared? Because I'm gonna do mining as well, and I just got a notification that the chimney sweep has arrived to the house, but I think he can work without me. That's what I'm gonna pay him to do. So we're hashing these guesses, and we're looking for a small number, and there's a minimum of how small. I'm sorry. it can only be so big, but it can be smaller. So it's like we're looking for a limbo guess, right? We need something to go underneath the bar, right?
Mm-hmm.
It can go just barely underneath the bar, or it can go entirely underneath the bar. But
You got
it's
it.
sort of a limbo guess is what we have going on there. With that, here's my number. I've got to find it on the screen now. 2016, 2000, so 2016. Every 2016 blocks, remember, and each one's supposed to be done on average 10 minutes per block, the network takes an audit of the last 2016 blocks and said, how did we do? Were we on average at 10 minutes a block? Were we more than that, 10 minutes a block, or were we less than that? And based on the answer to that, it adjusts the limbo bar, right? So if it's been, let me make sure I get this right. If it's been less than every 10 minutes, that means not enough blocks have been mined, okay? And we need now in the next 2 weeks more blocks to be mined a little bit more quickly so that we can keep this average of every 10 minutes. And so what it'll do, it would take that bar and raise it a little bit, which allows a few more numbers, guesses, appropriate guesses, to be the first one underneath to secure the block, receive the subsidy, receive the award, and set it up for the next block and its batch of transactions that are also being written onto the ledger. If we're over every 10 minutes, like if it's 12 minutes per block, maybe I said that wrong. I said that exact wrong, didn't I? I don't know. If we're under every 10 minutes, if it's less time, we need to make the guess harder. So we lower the limbo bar. And if it's like 15 minutes a block, then not enough blocks are being mined and we need to raise the bar. I think that's correct now. But 2016, and we've mentioned this before. It's called the difficulty adjustment. But here's what's so amazing about it. Let's say Ben gets a BitX miner. So he's going to add more guesses to the network. And let's say I get a BitX miner. By the way, while Jared and Ben were giving their last answer, I decided to buy a BitX miner, and I did. And I bought it through the Lightning Network, and it was super easy. So there's a plug for commerce. So I'm coming online with more hash power. Does that count as a
spur of the moment purchase or not? I don't know.
I've been planning it for a while. I just figured that'd be kind of fun to do it real time and see how quick it is. And I'm here to tell you, actually, paying with Bitcoin is faster than getting out your credit card. It's an amazing experience. And it's final settlement. That money is gone for me. It's to the organization. Now I'm trusting them to fulfill it, but it's not hung up with a credit card company for actually a large amount of time. But why is that important? Because if I'm coming on with more computer hashing power and the Haupts are coming on sometime real shortly, we're going to have more lottery guesses in this next 10 minutes. And if there's more computing power, more hashing power, more guessing power, then likely what we're going to have as a consequence is blocks are going to be found now more quickly than every 10 minutes, right? And so let's get really absurd. Let's say somehow we could magically now double the amount of hashing power, or make it so it's twice. Blocks are being found twice as quickly. If we were to do that, suddenly what we've told you before, that blocks being mined every 10 minutes on average, it just simply would not be true anymore. Or we can run it the other way. What if an authoritarian state, and this happened, such as China, about 4 years ago, China came through and said, no more mining here in China. Now, a couple things. People kept mining in China. They did it on the down low. Many people did. But a lot of hashing power went offline within a month of that order. A lot of it. And if a lot of it went offline, that would also affect this every 10 minutes. Well, what a beautiful thing that Satoshi Nakamoto built into it, this audit. Every 2016 blocks, that it would take a check of those last blocks, essentially the last 2 weeks, say, how did we do on our 10 minutes average? And then raise that limbo bar up or lower it down so as to restore equilibrium on the every 10 blocks, block every 10 minutes, rather. Pretty remarkable. Satoshi Nakamoto is said to have grabbed, think of technologies. He's standing on the shoulders of others, such as all technologists do, right? He's standing on the shoulders of others. He grabs a lot of, I'll call them Lego blocks, pieces that other people had invented already, and suddenly he sees the right pieces to put together in the right way. So for the most part, he was a borrower of technology, like most of us are, except for maybe he had this one very unique addition to it, which was precisely this: the difficulty adjustment every 2016 blocks.
All right. I'm going to sort of shift us away from mining here. So maybe this is our transfer sort of towards the end. The number I want to share, again, is a big number, but the number is 900 trillion. 900 trillion. So $900 trillion. I'm looking at a chart on my phone here. Maybe we can give a link to it in the description below. A chart from Jesse Myers that shows different assets in it. So things that we would either store value in, things that we hold value, try and save our purchasing power. So things like money, equities, bonds, real estate, art, gold, collectibles, and then Bitcoin. And so as of today, of that $900 trillion, according to his chart, bonds is about 300 trillion. Real estate is also about 300 trillion. Equities, that'd be like your stocks, are like 115 trillion, and then just dollars in general are 120 trillion dollars. And how much is the Bitcoin network? This would be a good quiz for you and you, Ben and David. $2 trillion, right? A drop in the bucket. In some ways, incredibly meaningless compared to all the other things. But as we think about the future, as we think about adoption again, what's the end game, if you will, of Bitcoin? Well, in the version that I'm looking at, he's talking about MicroStrategy and Strike, their new sort of convertible bond yielding that instrument that they're offering to the market. They're trying to get that $300 trillion bond market as part of their investment, as part of their company. But he would say, and I think we would too, that Bitcoin is targeting all of those various areas that would be and that people have used as a store of value. And so that as we think about 900 trillion, that let's say for sake of argument, Bitcoin takes even 1/10 of that. That would be 9 trillion, which would be what, 1, 2, 3, 4, almost 5 times more than it is now. And so assuming basic price times 8 or times 5, that would be $10 trillion, and 8 times 5 is 40. So that would be $400,000 per BTC. And we would even say that maybe that's pretty bearish if you're talking about the complete end game, that if that's as high as it ever gets, then Bitcoin has failed in our eyes, I think, at least to where we think it's going. And so those sort of numbers are really big again. But I think the point is, hey, you think you might have missed it. You think you might have, come in too late. It's only 2 trillion in a $900 trillion pond. Now, is it going to take everything? No, of course not. We're not ignorant. We're not claiming that sort of thing. But is it certainly capable of, and is it designed? Is it even more made for, even, I would say, much more than $2 trillion? I sure think so, and I think a heck of a lot of other people do as well. So 900 trillion is my last number I will share.
Love it. And I think, again, points to the fact that we're still very early. It'll be very interesting to know who's out there listening and what you're thinking about Bitcoin. Maybe you were thinking that you're too late. I hope that this episode has convinced you otherwise. I will yield my time. I want to make sure that David gets out to talk with his chimney sweep. That's a very important thing for running a real fireplace, proof of work kind of stuff. So
That's right.
Any final closing thoughts?
Really, no. This is just fun. We're deep into this. I think we realize we want all these numbers to be explanatory and helpful. We realize at the same time, likely at some point in this whether a particular number or just too many numbers, it can get to feel overwhelming. We didn't get here overnight to where we could talk about it with such eagerness, and we're just scratching the surface here. We could really talk for hours on this. I would say, what's your next question about Bitcoin? What's a number that has captured your imagination, but you don't understand it, even though we've talked about it? And just encourage you, just look into these things. I keep going back to my little family vacation that we just took to Southern Utah. I mean, how many hours did my wife and I take just researching things there? The answer is fewer than we used to because we know this area, but still, sort of for the joy of it and the importance of family time, we took time to investigate this. You're talking about stewarding the gifts God has given you for your future and the care of others. I just hope that would become a little bit weighty, but actually exciting. And I think for us, that went from being weighty and crushing to weighty and exciting, all because of Bitcoin for us as a technology that's really helpful. So I just encourage listeners along, if you're curious, be curious and dig in just a little bit. There's great answers, there's great resources, and you can have at it. But I'll wrap it up this way. We are headed towards Easter as we are in Lent. Ben, you mentioned rest. I've sort of had an operational definition of rest not recently, in past years, probably close to a decade. Rest occurs when we live in the accomplished work, but I might maybe add to that the enduring work of another. You mentioned that God the Father is still at work for us now. Jesus on the cross, it is finished. He can say that for me and for you. And finally, this path to Jerusalem, this death and resurrection of Christ, as the Apostle Paul says, the whole of the Christian faith rests on this. A theologian who once was Lutheran said once, if Christ is risen, nothing else matters. And if Christ isn't risen, nothing else matters. So you can noodle on that a little bit, but I'll just say that it is true, I think, of each of us that we were born into Christian homes. The Christian faith was handed down to us. But the Christian faith is the one faith that kind of presents you with its Achilles heel and says just that. If it's not about a feeling, it's not even about just pure conviction or naked conviction, but it says this. If you're going to have conviction in this, and if you're going to endure this, then this needs to be an enduring faith. And the only way this is an enduring faith is if the claim that Christ rose from the grave is true. And I think the three of us believe, I know that, we believe there's very ample good reason to believe that it's true. And so to say that to the hearer, if there's a skeptical hearer, or if there's a hearer interested in Bitcoin but doesn't know about the Christian faith, we'd say, certainly, we already said, investigate Bitcoin, but we'd also say maybe parallel to that, and quite frankly, more primary and more important than Bitcoin by far, investigate the resurrection of Jesus, and maybe engage us about that as well as we head towards this Easter time, and as the whole of the Christian faith is an Easter resurrection faith. Christ is risen.
He is risen indeed.